It was the early days of the French Revolution when on October 5, 1789, thousands of hungry peasants, mostly working women, marched towards Versailles as they believed that the palace was rationing food. After the invasion, the royal family, namely Louis XVI, his wife Marie-Antoinette, and their two children Marie-Thérèse and Louis Charles were forced to take refuge in the king's apartment. However, the family was captured by the angry crowd and moved to the Tuileries Palace. After 2 years of living in fear for their lives and the situation during the revolution deteriorating, the family tried to escape, but they were recognized on their way and transported back to the Tuileries Palace. They lived there for another year in captivity before also that palace was stormed by armed revolutionaries. The royal family then was forced to take refuge in the Legislative Assembly and Louis XVI was officially deposed. On August 13, 1792, the family was moved to the Temple Tower where they were held as prisoners. Only a few months later, on January 21, 1793, Louis XVI was executed on the guillotine. 6 months after the execution of the king, their son Louis Charles was forcibly taken away from former Queen Marie-Antoinette. Left in the Temple Tower were now Marie-Antoinette with her daughter and Madame Elizabeth, the youngest sister of the former king. Later that year, Marie-Antoinette was found guilty for high treason and was also executed by guillotine on October 16, 1793. The following year, the king's sister, Madame Elizabeth, was also executed. The only person left in that room was Marie-Thérèse. She would go on to be the only one surviving the reign of terror in France, and that's why she's the topic of today's video. Before we jump into the video, I wanted to mention that I now also have a Patreon site where you can further support my work if you like to do so. There will be a link in the description box. You will get exclusive behind-the-scenes footage, unposted material, and much more. Let's get back to the beginning of this story, years before the French Revolution broke out. It was the 19th of December 1778 when Marie-Thérèse Charlotte of France was born at the Palace of Versailles to her parents King Louis XVI and his queen Marie-Antoinette. She was the child everybody was waiting for as her parents had been married for over 8 years without having children. But everybody present had hoped for a boy and heir rather than a daughter, and so the disappointment in the room was noticeable. The delivery was traumatizing for her mother, the queen, who almost died of suffocation as the room was crowded and unventilated. As Marie-Antoinette fell unconscious, somebody finally had the sparking idea to open up the windows. Marie-Antoinette woke up with Marie-Thérèse already being born. She greeted her daughter and said, "Poor little one, you are not desired, but you will be nonetheless dear to me. A son would have belonged to the state. You will belong to me." Little Marie-Thérèse was baptized that same day and named after her grandmother, Empress Maria Theresia of Austria, and Charlotte after her mother's favorite sister, Maria Carolina of Austria, who was also known as Charlotte in the family. The king was also happy and is said to have been an affectable father who delighted in spoiling Marie-Thérèse. Marie-Antoinette was the stricter parent and was determined that Marie-Thérèse should not grow up as haughty as her father's sisters. In contrast to the rumors about Marie-Antoinette, she accordingly often invited children of lower rank to play with Marie-Thérèse and encouraged her daughter to give them her toys. Her mother also made sure to teach her daughter that not everybody has the privilege to grow up in such a palace as she did. Soon Marie-Thérèse was joined by 2 baby brothers and 1 baby sister. However, all of them would suffer early deaths. When Marie-Thérèse was 11 years old, the French Revolution had already broken out, and we approached the point we were at the beginning of this video. Especially Marie-Thérèse's mother was the object of anger as she was blamed for alleged exaggerated spendings. After her aunt was executed, Marie-Thérèse remained in her room in the Temple Tower alone. She had 2 books with her which she read over and over again, but soon she obviously got bored of them. She asked for more books, but the government denied that request. She was constantly exposed to the constant screams and cries of her younger brother who got beaten up by the guards. He died there in 1795 while Marie-Thérèse never was told what had happened to her family. She only knew that her father was dead. Within the many hours of boredom, Marie-Thérèse scratched the following sentences onto the wall of her room. Marie-Thérèse Charlotte is the most unhappy person in the world. She can obtain no news of her mother, nor be reunited to her, though she has asked for it 1,000 times. Live, my good mother, whom I love well, but of whom I can hear no tidings. O my Father, watch over me from heaven above. O my God, forgive those who have made my parents suffer. This text again underlines that she had no idea what had happened to her mother. It was not until August 1795, nearly 2 years after the execution of her mother, when she finally was informed about her family's fate. She began crying and letting out loud sobs of grief. On the evening of her 17th birthday, Marie-Thérèse was finally released and brought to Vienna, where her cousin, Holy Roman Emperor Francis II, was reigning. She later moved to her uncle, the then self-proclaimed Louis XIX, who was living in Mitau, which is located in today Latvia. He wished for Marie-Thérèse to marry her cousin, Louis-Antoine, Duke of Angoulême. Marie-Thérèse agreed, and the couple, despite the groom's father trying to persuade his son the other way, were married on June 10, 1799. The former royal family moved to Great Britain until the Bourbon dynasty was restored after the abdication of Napoleon in 1814. Marie-Thérèse entered her former home country with great distrust. She visited the place her brother had died and the burial place of her parents. When Napoleon briefly returned in 1815, her uncle Louis XIX fled the country while she remained in France despite Napoleon's threat to get her arrested. For her stubbornness, Napoleon remarked that Marie-Thérèse was the only man in her family. After the second defeat of Napoleon, the Bourbon dynasty was once again restored and everybody returned back to France. Louis XIX died in 1824 and was succeeded by his younger brother and father-in-law of Marie-Thérèse. Following this, Marie-Thérèse's husband was now the heir to the throne. However, the next revolution was already knocking on the back door. Following the revolution of 1830, Charles X abdicated in favor of his son, who 20 minutes later abdicated in favor of his nephew. During these 20 minutes, Marie-Thérèse was technically Queen Consort of France. On August 4, 1830, the family was forced into exile for good. They boarded a ship towards Britain where they started over in Edinburgh. The family, which included Marie-Thérèse, her husband and father-in-law, and her husband's nephew and his mother, moved over to Prague where they briefly lived in luxurious apartments in Prague Castle. The royal family left Prague for Gorizia, which is in today Italy. There Marie-Thérèse nursed her uncle and father-in-law through his last illness in 1836. After the death of her husband in 1844, Marie-Thérèse decided to move to Castle Frosdorf, which is located outside of Vienna. She spent her days walking around, reading, sewing, and praying. She died on October 19, 1851, of pneumonia and was buried next to her husband. On her gravestone you can find Queen Dowager of France inscribed. After her death, a theory came up that the Marie-Thérèse that died in 1851 was in fact her adoptive half-sister Ernestine Lambriquet. The theory says that Marie-Thérèse and Ernestine switched places in the carriage towards Austria after Marie-Thérèse's liberation from the Temple Tower. According to his theory, Marie-Thérèse then settled in Germany where she lived isolated from the outside world. The woman that lived there was named Sophie Boda and rarely spoke to anyone, but when she spoke, she did so in French. When she was outside, her face was always covered with a veil. There were claims that Marie-Thérèse, after years of captivity, was too traumatized to just continue with her life. That's why the grave of a woman in Germany was exhumed to obtain DNA for testing. The DNA of a living descendant of Marie Antoinette's sister was used for these tests. Although there are 6 generations in between them, the DNA was tested for something called mtDNA, which stays the same over all the generations. However, the mtDNA taken from the unknown lady differed significantly, while the mtDNA of Marie-Thérèse's brother matched.